So to begin with, I guess I have to accept that.
Yeah, I can do
To
that.
begin, I'd like to ask you to please take off your shoes and have your flutes handy. We'll have time for questions and discussion when I finish talking. When I was 12 years old, I heard Albert Tipton perform at the Aspen Music Festival. And I thought to myself, that music is in me, and I wanted a flute. 2 years later, I was taking flute lessons from Albert Tipton, and I had found my life's calling. 11 years later, I began a new musical journey, starting with my first lesson with Jean-Pierre Rampal, when he taught me a simple practice technique that is so easy, anyone can master it over time. But it's a process. Every day brings new insights. As I demonstrate with various exercises, I think you will hear some subtle and significant differences in my tone quality and intonation as the program progresses. Here's my story. Upon finishing my master's degree at the University of Michigan, I began my first position as principal flute with the Toledo Symphony. For my second concert, Jean-Pierre Rampal appeared as guest soloist, premiering the Cacciatorian Concerto. The moment I met him, he was so warm and friendly that I spontaneously asked for a lesson. Of course, he replied. For that lesson, I played Bach's E minor sonata, the second movement. And after a few notes, he looked at me with eyes wide open and said, "But you're playing da, 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 da." He explained that my attacks lacked vibrancy and focus, and that I needed to practice each note on syllable ku with what he called diaphragm attacks. Then he played the Bach movement for me on syllable ku, and I was totally amazed. Then he asked me to put my hands on his back while he played so I could feel the muscles moving inside his body. On the outside, he looked like he wasn't doing anything at all. But inside, I felt constant motion with every attack. Rampal told me I must practice Tafanel Gobert Daily Studies number 4, excuse me, with syllables hu and ku, to train my body's muscles to do the same. And that's it. Except that he invited me to France the following summer to his master class in Nice. I'm sorry, I'm a little froggy today. When he left Toledo, I knew 2 things: the sound of his diaphragm attacks and what his body felt like when he played them. All I had to do was seek ways to recreate them. In the months leading up to my trip to France, every day I practiced all 8 pages.
Sheryl, you've become mute. Sheryl is mute.
Sheryl. Oh my God. Sheryl, can I
Was I muted all along?
We can hear
me
you now.
before?
We can hear you.
Do I have to start over?
No.
Yes, please.
No,
Can't
it
hear
was
me,
only the
but
last couple of minutes that
should I
we
proceed
couldn't
where I
hear you.
was?
When you started saying you had practiced Tafanel
I don't know
Gobert
what
all
people
8
are telling
pages,
me.
then you went mute.
Well, okay, I'm going to proceed. I don't know how I got muted, but now I'm going to try to recreate Tafanel Gobert like I started to practice after he left. So I started. And when I got to E, of course, I cracked the note, our favorite note. So when that happened, I would try to move around until I found the E. And I would always discover that I needed to move my pelvis. So so you can't see me, but I'm wiggling around here to try to find the placement for E. Well, in class the next summer, Rampal brought this very concept up when a student cracked an E in class. And he said, I had a whole year complex when I couldn't play an E. And then I discovered that the placement for E in the diaphragm in every register is always for the lowest E. That was a life-altering comment that saves any need to buy a split E. So once you find your low E, I use exactly the same placement in my muscles. I wish you could see me. I couldn't get my iPhone to work, so I'm on my laptop. And it's always there, and it's always there in the high octave too. But I was still a beginner using this technique. Sometimes in practice, I would notice that notes side by side didn't have the same quality. For example, let's see if I can do that. And so I'd figure out, going back and forth, how to get the two notes to match. And over time, I was able to play a scale so that all the notes would match. Now, my progress improved every single day after I started with A minor. Rampal suggested you start with A minor and end with C major so you don't have to play a low C first thing in the day. So as I practiced, it was a progression from A minor through the scales, and as I went along, every scale got a little bit better. I always practiced with the metronome. But once I arrived in Nice then, I noticed that every time Rampal demonstrated a passage, his body looked completely natural. He used his body as one unit from the top of his head to the base of his spine. And he did move, but when he moved, he kept that relationship in his body. He didn't move like students next to him would move all over the place, and they would play maybe, and the tone quality would change. But Rampal just stood there with his, from the top of his head to the base of his spine. And if he moved his knees. So he kept the quality of his sound all of the time. That summer, I met Rampal's assistant, Alain Marion, who taught a class of young French students. Now, Rampal's students were always welcome to go to Marion's class, and one day I asked him for a lesson. Little did I know that I would learn an important piece of the puzzle. He taught me to tongue using just the air in my mouth. Placing his tongue between his teeth, he spit the attack, saying, poo, poo, poo. And he asked me to play the flute. I tried over and over to imitate him with no success. And this went on for an hour. He said over and over again, again, two, again, two. And he probably repeated saying two over 100 times. And suddenly and miraculously, my tone sounded vibrant and free and felt unlike anything I had ever experienced before. We looked at each other in total amazement and recognition. What was the secret? I accidentally imitated his French pronunciation, and the tone resounded instantaneously. Here I was speaking like an American, and when I put my tongue between the teeth, the tone changed instantaneously. In that moment, I recognized the connection between the French language and the art of Jean-Pierre Rampal. In spoken French, the word bouche, for mouth, molds the mouth to shape the air on its way out. Put your finger under your lip and say the word bouche. Bouche, bouche, bouche. And feel how your lower lip has a way of hugging your finger. Say it again and notice how the two lips work together. Bouche, bouche, to create a perfect embouchure. And the word two shapes a perfect aperture. In English, when we tongue behind our teeth, our lips can play without any relationship to each other. But the minute you speak French, bouche, the lips work together and this tone is wonderful. Now, let's try an exercise together. Hold your hand in front of your mouth and tongue the word two over and over again, and feel how much space on your hand the air covers as it hits the palm of your hand. Now, using just the air in your mouth, pull the tongue away as if you're spitting a piece of rice or tobacco. And put your hand in front of your mouth. You should feel the lips working together and the air is very concentrated. It takes much less air. Marion explained that a baby learns to walk by seeing where it wants to go. Likewise, he said we should envision the sound inside our heads and find a way to produce it. He said that the real attack comes from the diaphragm, and practicing with syllable hu or ha cultivates the use of a diaphragm like a singer. Ha, 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 ha. Perfect example would be the Queen of the Night aria. I wish I could sing it, but it's that kind of a sound, and it cultivates that use of the diaphragm like they sing. He said, make it short and light, like a string player's pizzicato. Speed is not important, only quality. Well, these are some of the things I learned that summer in France. Back home, I knew I needed to accomplish 4 things. I needed to continue to attack with the diaphragm like Rampal and Marion taught me. I needed to pull the tongue away like I learned from Marion. And I had to try to do both with a French accent, even though I didn't speak French at the time. And I needed to learn how to teach these concepts to non-French speaking students. And so I continued on my journey. Even now, I discovered limitless uses of the technique that go far beyond diaphragm attacks that I learned in my first lesson. Most of them relate to the pelvic and abdominal muscles. With that as our starting point, here are ways to experience how to build muscles to articulate on the flute that impact breathing and phrasing. Rampal always spoke of the diaphragm, but there are many muscles involved in the abdominal area. For the sake of this demonstration, though, I will use the word diaphragm as Rampal did. Please join me now in trying some exercises that pave the way to develop your own pelvic power. First, watch me pant like a puppy. Now, join me in panting. I want to see you all pant along with me. Do you notice that the air comes in and out as you pant? Let's see if I can make the screen see my hand. Can you see my hand going? And sideways? I hope you can see that. And I want you to put your hands now on your tummies and pant again to feel the air going in and out. Now, I want you to put your hands on your side and back like Rampal had me do and pant. And you should feel something like I felt when I put my hands on Rampal's back. Now, if I articulate on the flute with hu or ha, like I'm panting or laughing, the simultaneous release of the tone and abdominal bounce automatically brings air back into the lungs. Let me try this for you with the flute. Without the tongue, just diaphragm attacks. So as I feel like I'm grabbing the air. Ha, 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 and that tummy goes in like I'm panting. Now I'm going to try that with a little opening of a Kohler etude for you. I have to look off to the side for a moment, but I'm going to just use the articulation of the diaphragm attacks slowly. And so on. So with every release of a note, air goes in automatically. Now let me play that again, and I will gradually get faster to show you that I still let the air in between every note. Between every note, I was letting air in, no matter how fast I went. I can play like that all day long. I could take my taffinel and go. And so on. The air comes in automatically, so I always have a full tank. Now let me demonstrate that without diaphragm attacks. I'm going to play normally like I did before I met Rampal. And that's what he meant by sounding da, 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 da. Can you hear that the tone lacks vibrancy? It lacks focus of the diaphragm attack. As compared with, and I have to breathe. So when you play with these diaphragm attacks, I feel like I'm pulling the sound out of the flute instead of putting it in by blowing. In fact, in France, Rampal kept telling us, tirez le son, pull the sound out of the flute, and you'll never have any gasping effect. Now fast forward about 8 years from when I first went to France to another moment in my life when I was at the right place at the right time. I lived across the street from a woman who had been a Martha Graham dancer in New York. Martha Graham was a woman who transformed modern dance in the United States in the 20s in ways that are still used today. So one night I was in my neighbor's kitchen helping her prepare for a dinner party when she began reminiscing about her days in New York with Martha Graham. She was from Augusta, Georgia, and she had a very southern accent. And she said to me, "Sherry, Martha Graham used to teach us to open our bodies from the bottom of our ribs to our hip bones in the front and back of our bodies." So I'm going to try to change my screen to show you. So here's my lowest rib, and here's my hip bone. So she said, open that area in front and back. At that moment, I created the position she described and realized that it felt similar to the body position I used to play my whoos and coos. And ever since then, if I find that I'm not producing the kind of sound I want, I immediately check the position between my hip bones and lowest ribs. And I teach my students to be Martha Graham dancers with great results. Now, the other day, I saw online this little skeleton to buy. And I thought, this is perfect. You can see that the body is very flexible. I don't know what happened to one of the arms. There it goes. But the area where all the work is done is between the lowest rib and the pelvis, all that wide open area. That's where all of the whoos and coos are, and the focus of the sound. So right now, I'd like you to put your thumbs on your lowest ribs and your pinky on your pelvic bone and open your bodies in front and back. Just grow. Now, if you only put them in front and grow like this, you're going to be leaning backward and your back is going to be skinny. So you have to make sure that you're lifting up and out of your hips to open your body between the lowest rib and your hip bone. Listen to how I play without Martha Graham. Here's just a scale. Now I'm going to go into my Martha Graham position. I hope you can hear a difference. Martha Graham. Quite different, I think. Now, for my next magical moment. Many years after my first trip to France, I experienced a new use for pelvic power to add to my musical toolbox. I was in my hometown, Cheyenne, Wyoming, helping my folks, and I signed up for a yoga class that meant every morning at 8 a.m. So my morning routine became go to yoga, come home for breakfast, and then practice. There were 3 different teachers who taught slightly different yoga styles, and I learned wonderful concepts from each one of them. But one teacher in particular taught a kind of yoga called Iyengar. This woman had been a clarinet major at Indiana University, and she also knew something about music. So Iyengar yoga focuses on precise body positions. The teacher would begin every class asking us to place our feet hip distance apart, with our feet parallel to each other on the outside of our feet, not the inside. And so when we get our feet lined up, and I'm doing it right now on my floor that's wooden, so I have those slats. When I line up the outside of my feet, I feel like my toes are pointing in a little bit. Try to do this now in your homes. Then she had us lift our toes to balance on the bones, the bone behind the big toe, the bone behind the pinky, and in the center of the heel, of the palm of the heel. But she said you can divide that in 2, so you could have these 4 balance points, or maybe only 3. So I'm doing that right now, and it takes me a minute always to get balanced between the bone behind my big toe and my pinky. Normally I might feel like I'm behind my big toe, but when I get it, and I'm holding my toes up. Now, I didn't have a very good posture there because I have to turn a little bit sideways to do that. So let me try that again. Then she told us, lower your toes, stand in that position, drop your toes, and without moving your feet, pull your heels apart. Now I can't show you my feet, but I can show it to you on my hands. Right now, I'm going to engage the palms of my hands as if they're my heels and pull them apart. Can you see what happens with my arms? It activates my arms. And the same thing happens when you do that with your feet. Can you try that now in your homes? Line up your feet parallel to each other on the outside of your feet and raise your toes, balance between the 3 or 4 balance points. Then lower your toes, and without moving your feet, pull your heels apart. When I do that, I feel like it raises my arches and empowers my legs, and it particularly energizes the inside of my thighs. In fact, in one class, she told us to imagine when we did that we were, for the ladies out there, pulling pantyhose up. I don't know if people still wear pantyhose, but if you imagine when you're pulling your heels apart that you're actually pulling pantyhose up and you pull your skin up in your legs, you energize your legs and the inner thighs. And so on. Try to get that feel that you're pulling up the skin on your legs like they're pantyhose. Well, about 10 days after I started yoga, one morning, when I began my flute practice on Who's and Coos, without thinking, I just looked down at my feet, lined my feet like I had just done in yoga class, raised my toes, put them down, pulled the feet apart, heels apart, and the first sound that came out just about knocked me over. I couldn't believe it. Every day in my practice, it would take me a little while to find my balance. Several notes at least, but all of a sudden, just by lining up my feet like this, pulling the heels apart, the tone was there. It was powerful and focused, And I suddenly remembered that one day in class in France, Alain Marion told us that playing the flute was like doing yoga. And there it was. Then I began to experiment with my practice, recording it to see if my initial impression was correct. And it was. So I'm going to demonstrate now, playing a little bit, just kind of shifting my feet a little bit. And let's see if I have something here I can play. Well, I wanted something slurred, but here's a boom studies. So I'm kind of not balanced. I'm just sort of wandering around. But when I get into the first position with my toes up, the difference in that. Now I'm going to add the next step. I'm going to put my toes down and pull my heels apart. Here's toes up. Here's toes down, pulling heels apart. It's subtle. I like to experiment with it. And sometimes when I'm playing a concert, if I get to a place where I think that the focus of the pitch, the notes, might be a little dull, I might just suddenly raise my toes and play to make sure I'm balanced on my feet. By the way, Rampal said sometimes in a concert when tutti passages, he might play on coups instead of with his articulation with his tongue. So let's recap the evolution of my progress. First, I met Rampal and learned to practice with who's and coups. Then I learned the Marthagram technique. And then I took the Iyengar class and I learned to play with toes up, then down, and pulling the heels apart. Now, in the summer of 2020, my life provided new insights into pelvic power in an unexpected way. First, the bad news. On the day before Memorial Day, early in the COVID epidemic and lockdown, I was sweeping the floor in my bird room and I fell, breaking my hip on the way down. It took me over 2 hours to be able to get to a phone to call 911. And I spent the next 3.5 weeks in the hospital recovering from complications after a hip replacement surgery. Now for the good news. Hours after surgery, when I was back in my room, a physical therapist arrived to teach me how to rebuild my leg and hip muscles and nerves that had been cut in the surgery. She gave me 3 exercises that provided new ideas for playing the flute. There I was, lying flat on my back in bed, and she told me to raise my feet up and down from my ankles 10 times, like this. Boom, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. And after I did that, of course, it was a little slower than that, but then the second exercise she taught me was to press my knees into the bed 10 times. So here I am going 4, 5, and so on. And the third exercise she told me was to squeeze my glutes or my butt 10 times. Squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. And she told me to do these 3 exercises repeatedly throughout the days to come. Now, sometimes while doing these exercises, I would be lying in bed and I would put my hands on my thighs. And I would notice the connections between each exercise and all the muscles in my legs and my pelvis. And squeezing my glutes reminded me of similarities in my pelvis to Martha Graham and Iyengar yoga. When I was finally able to play the flute again, I experimented with squeezing my glutes, and it worked. I'm going to forget about Iyengar, I'm going to forget about Martha Graham, and I'm just going to squeeze my glutes. Let me see if I can try that on the little coloring tube. Now, if I'm going slow motion, I'll squeeze on each note. And it has exactly the same effect as panting does. The air goes in automatically. So let's see if I do that quickly. It's a little more challenging to squeeze on every note and let go, but I have the concept of the panting and letting go too. So, but squeezing the glutes puts my body in the position of using my body from the top of my head to the base of my spine. All right, let me take a breath now and continue here. So today I've talked about a variety of concepts that I've learned over the years that have helped me find the focus of the sound and allow the breath to come in automatically so I never have to gasp for breath. And so I'm going to give you some pointers on how I practice. I begin with the intention of mindfulness. I make the decision to leave the past behind every day because every moment is an opportunity to overcome limitations and grow. Some days I don't play as well as others because maybe I'm recovering from COVID that I had recently, or the flu, or I didn't sleep well. So every day I have to start over, finding my balance, working on my muscles. So every day I invent a new practice routine. I vary the etudes, I vary the music, the way I practice my scales, and I do this every day to stay in a constant state of self-renewal as an artist. This is the secret to keeping music making interesting. Repeating the same warm-up routine every single day, often without listening, is so boring that we end up mastering bad habits. The other thing I do is I record my practice, and I talk while I'm practicing to describe what I'm trying to accomplish. No matter what I'm playing, I might say something like, now I'm playing with my toes up. Now I'm playing Martha Graham. Various things like that, so that later on, when I'm exercising on an exercise bike or walking a track and listen to my practice, I can hear if what I was planning on doing and how it worked. So that's how I practice to be sure what I sound like. If I don't record my practice, I think I sound wonderful because it feels good, but it really doesn't. But the recorder never lies. Now, how should you build your own practice? If you don't do this already with these muscles exercises, I would say begin your practice from your first note without judgment of right and wrong. Focus on what you sound like and what your body feels like. When we judge ourselves, it puts us in a bad frame of mind. We say, oh no, that wasn't good. Don't do that. Just feel your body and listen to what the sound sounds like. Take time to balance your body with feet first. Work to find a body position that empowers and allows you to play freely and effortlessly. Practice with a metronome. if you're playing on who's and coos, put the metronome on 60 and play a note, let go. Play a note, let go. And subdivide. Subdivision gives quality to the note and character. Find your pelvic power with concepts like Martha Graham or Iyengar Yoga. And then play the who's and coos slowly with whatever music that you're playing at the time. Let me find a piece here. Here's a different, here's a Handel sonata movement. So it's a slow movement. And I'm counting dum, ba. Sometimes I'll subdivide that half note. And I find that as the line descends often, I have to keep coming up out of my hip joint to not lose my posture. If I go, the next note, the low note, is not going to have a good focus. But and then when I play the piece slurring, I use my diaphragm has developed all kinds of subtle and supple uses from practicing all of these diaphragm attacks that I can and have a lovely line with all the time in between notes filled with the subdivisions and keeping the sound going. If you practice like this, you will find your way. The future will come. In the book that I wrote, Bel Canto Flute, the Rampal School, I put together 67 pieces of music for all lessons from Rampal's class that are progressive, that start with stepwise and go through finally ending up with enormous intervals so that you train your body to stay open from the highest to the lowest note in a particular piece of music. Here's another example. Here's a Garibaldi etude. The highest note here is a high F, and the lowest note is, so when I find my posture, hold my toes up, and so on. So these are ways to practice all of these exercises that I have told you and build up your pelvic power. Now, I want to finish my talking before we open up for some discussion or questions. And in closing, I'd like to emphasize that the essence of Jean-Pierre Rampal's artistry comes from playing with an artistic vision and temperament. He would say, don't make flute, make music. And in class, he would tell us things like sing, play with love, with joy. Sometimes students would ask him, how do you make colors? And he would say, if you don't feel them, you don't make them. But with the use of the diaphragm in all of these exercises we've talked about, we discovered that diaphragm attacks have ways of shaping the sound. And they develop these interesting ways of using all the abdominal muscles to create colors within the body. So if you practice the Rampal School's techniques to produce vibrant articulations and colorful tone qualities, you will find they open doors to expressing the music you feel in your heart and your soul. So thank you for tuning in today, and now let's take a moment to shift gears for you to ask questions, and I hope I'll be able to hear you. Can you unmute yourselves if you have questions? Does anyone have a question? Please, someone.
I
Miss-
do have a question.
Yes.
I had put it in the
Are you
in the
muted?
remarks. I understand the who part, but I missed the
You're
coo.
talking, I can't hear you.
Um,
Do you see the,
can you look into the mess in the chat?
does the NFA have to unmute you?
I can hear her too, Sherry. Make
Yeah.
sure your volume is up
The volume.
on your computer. Sherry, can you make sure your volume is up?
All right, type me some messages.
Okay.
It was the last message in the box.
I can.
I understood the who's, but I missed the coo part.
Okay, I don't know where to start with the text here. And I can't hear anyone.
No. Not the who, the coo. Cecilia.
I can see who is speaking, but I can't hear them.
Yes.
Somebody said they love my necklace. I found it on Facebook. My sound disappeared. Were you able to finally hear me again? All right, somebody texted me to explain coo. Okay? All right, well, it's just coo. Say coo over and over. And pant like a puppy. Put your hands on your tummy and go coo, 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 coo. It's never coo, 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 coo. It's never putting. It's always taking. Coo. Just like panting. First pant. Ha, 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 ha. Then coo, 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 coo. It's the exact same motion. And by the way, another point that's very interesting is that when Marion taught me to pull the tongue away, it reinforces the same direction. The tongue comes away. The muscle goes away. It bounces, and that's how the air goes back in. Let's see. Vic Wheeler says the inside shape of the mouth makes a big difference. Well, my mouth is open inside, yes. When I say boosh, boosh, you feel the inside of your mouth. You can't play like this because it closes your sound. So when you're going boosh, opening up the inside of your mouth, and then keep it in that position. If I shut my mouth, no sound. But one of the things I noticed the first time I saw Rampal in Toledo was that he did not change his embouchure. When I was young, I was taught to do oohs and all kinds of different things in the United States, and many people were taught that. In those days, I don't know if it still is true. But with Rampal, I saw he didn't move his mouth at all, and I knew I needed to stop that. But when you find your boosh, here's coo. My mouth is open in the back. There's definitely space between the back of my teeth, my molars. I don't open my mouth like, let's see if I can show you on my hand. I don't open my mouth like this with the back of the mouth shut. I open my mouth like this, back and front together. Back and front together. I wish I could hear all of you. This is a real bummer. I don't know if I'm seeing embouchure. I see that Lee Noble says embouchure at 313. She's a wonderful flutist and French teacher. Let's see some others here. Are there other questions that I'm not seeing that went back too far? No? Oh, okay. Somebody asked, should we sit or stand during these exercises? Is something wrong with my audio? Somebody from NFA just contacted me, I think, sent me a message to check my audio. I don't know where that was. Okay, sitting or standing. I have a chair right here. Okay, now, if you're balanced on your feet, here, here, and here, you can balance on your butt and your thighs too. So I don't know if I can show you this well, but I'm going to sit down now. And now I'm getting balanced now, and I'm pulling myself up out of my hips. I'm doing exactly the same thing sitting down. And if I don't do that, this is a sound that I've heard singers talk about. They say when a singer is sitting on their voice, they're collapsed between the hip bone and the lowest rib. So this is a real Martha Graham technique. So you get sitting in your chair, you get balanced. You can squeeze your butt too, and that'll help. Now let me tell you something else that I find quite interesting that relates to this in a certain way. Every time I give a master class, the most recent being in Costa Rica this summer, there are several people in the class who I have to shift their posture. I'm going to try and show you what happens. In every master class, there's always somebody that does this. Listen to my sound. As opposed to, okay, close your eyes so you can't see what I'm doing. Everybody close your eyes. Okay, so I'm going to play this way. And then I'm going to play. You can hear the difference, yes? Okay, now open your eyes and I'll show you what I was doing. We find this so often. People bring their flute to their mouth and they go like this. They shift their posture instead of lining up from bottom to top. So when you line up, when you get your toes up, try this. Stand up and pretend that you're bringing your flute to your mouth and you're going to be leaning back, okay? Try that. And now, in the middle of it, raise your toes, and you will see that immediately you start to line up your body from bottom to top. Do you feel that? Shake a head, yes or no. Okay, so here I am. I can be standing any old direction and raise my toes. All of a sudden, I'm lined up. If I lose my focus for a second, I raise my toes. Now the same thing happens when I'm sitting down. I can still bring my flute up, and there's no focus to the sound. So when I check my posture, come up my body all at once, I feel like I'm really rooting myself in the chair. Just like I'm rooting my feet in the floor like a tree is, okay? And another thing I like to, and by the way, you know, we have to play sitting a lot. I've spent my life playing in wind quintets and orchestras, other chamber music, sitting. So, yes, of course, you have to practice sometimes sitting down. But if you keep in mind the sound in your ear that you want to play, with focus and power and color, even in pianissimos, you can play with the softest possible sound you can imagine. And it can still be focused and carry to the, like Afternoon of a Faun, to the last row in the concert hall, because it just floats out. So let's see, that was that question. I like to do one more thing. I like to practice. Let's see if I back up here. I don't know if you can, let me see. Try and put that like that. Okay, I'm going to the wall now. Can you still see me? Somebody nod. Okay, now I'm against the wall. I've got my knees bent. Okay, and I'm using the wall. Every time I get to the wall, I sound better. So I do a lot of wall practice just to check. And you can practice your whoos and coos against a wall, and you'll feel that when you let go, right away, the air just goes in by itself. You can play all day long like that. Now, one other thing that I notice in my practice is, so this summer I came back from Costa Rica with COVID, and when I started practicing again, I was totally exhausted. And I just really worked on the whoos and coos and whatever I was playing the same way. And I would maybe do that for 20 minutes, and I would, because I had my tape recorder going, I could hear the things I was saying, and sometimes I would say things like, oh my God, I'm exhausted. I would hear that when I would be exercising, because I was saying it during my practice. But after you do that, then you can start playing other music, and you've got your body set for the day. You can go and play whatever you want, and it's less effort than actually practicing your whoos and your coos and your etudes and everything with the whoos and coos. So I practice, 20 minutes or so at least. Sometimes I start with, here's a good exercise. If I'm going to do, let's say, de la sonorité, Moïse, this is a wonderful exercise. Here's a normal one. I'll do it on coo and lift up out of the lowest note. The minute I crack a note, and I do crack notes, I think they're gifts. They remind me that somehow I wasn't in a great position. So that trains me to keep lifting up out of my hips so I don't collapse. Now I see I have 32 new messages. Let's see. You were something at the end. Tonguing? No, I haven't been tonguing. I've been cooing. Pull the heels apart from each other without moving the feet. So you're just activating your inner muscles, I guess, and it makes me feel like I'm raising my arches. That was from Ellen Burr. Pulling the heels from each other, okay? And somebody wrote, no, from the back of the heels, okay? Oh, here's somebody, there's a PT person. Yay! And it resonates with yoga, the spread and lift from pelvis. Somebody asked me to see how my volume of my audio is. I thought I checked that before. Yeah, my audio's on all the way. Okay. To squeeze glutes reminds me of telling students to use their tail like my parakeets. Oh, I'm so glad you said that, Ellen, because I have birds, and one is a cockatiel, and I've taught the cockatiel to sing Queen of the Night and Rossini, and when the cockatiel does the Rossini, you can see it right here. And the Queen of the Night is really funny because I was teaching the bird to sing Queen of the Night when he was a baby, and I hadn't been doing it very long when I had to go to Cheyenne because my sister was ill. And I ended up being gone for like 9 months. So when I came back, the bird was going, and I didn't know what that was. I hadn't taught the bird that. And then I suddenly realized that the accent was off. Anyway, it's very cute. But I learned a lot from watching my cockatiel's tummy while he's singing. Let's see. So let's see. Somebody, Judy Pellerin says, I got the who's, but the coos. Okay, coos and who's are the same. Coos are even easier than who's because they've got that little bit of attack. Here, if you're going whoo, 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 it really gets deep inside those muscles. And then you add the coo, coo. It's like adding the tongue. So you just coo with the French accent. I wish Lee could get on so we could hear her and she could say them with perfect French accents for us. Lee, are you still there?
Well, I'm here, but I don't know if anybody can hear me.
Can you unmute yourself and try to see if anybody
Yes,
can hear you?
yes, we can hear you.
Okay, très bien.
I can't hear. I don't know if you can hear each other, can you?
I don't have my
Am I
flute
the
out.
only one who can't hear?
Yes.
You can hear all of each other? What a bummer. Okay, Lee, speak some French. Say your who's and coos and twos for everybody else over and over again.
Okay, so the difference in my brain is that
And
I'm
Sonia, raise
actually,
your hand when she's finished.
I'm going to type this in the chat as well, but I say who, not you. Sorry, damn autocorrect. It keeps doing it. Who, thank you. And who, well, in French it's spelled with a U. So it's an OU sound and not the French touche, like Sherry was talking about earlier, but both sounds work perfectly well. That if you've got your embouchure right and you mash up your finger against your lips like we were doing before and say bouche, it actually works better if you say bouche, bouche, and you tighten up the sides just a little bit. The trouble is you don't want to have your mouth too tight. So if you say coo, 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 that works just as well because having the flute up against your lip is going to shape your embouchure the way you need it to be anyway. Does that help? Sonia, you see what I'm talking about? Yeah, Cecile?
I totally do. I totally
Okay.
do. And she
Okay.
can't hear us, so I don't know how to tell her to keep
Can I say
going.
something?
Okay.
I will send a message
So
for
I
her
see
again
people were
on
asking me
her phone.
to talk on the phone.
Yeah, I'll text
Somebody
her.
did call me, but I have checked my volume and it's just perfect. Do I listen to my practice recording right away or later? Later. Oh, sometimes I might, if I'm about to play a concert, I might make a take and listen to it then. Let's see, is Robin still on? I was at the University of Michigan before you. I'm the only one who can't hear. Well, I don't know. Let me unplug a microphone that I'm using. See if it makes a difference. All right, can somebody talk for me and see if that made a difference?
Yeah,
Hear
can you
us
hear us?
now?
Oh, I can hear
Oh.
you. But my sound won't be as good. Okay, great.
Yay!
Great.
Well, does anybody have any quick questions? I don't know if I've seen all of the questions that people have sent me. So the who tends to get the articulation very deep inside. Here's who.
Now is your flute that is we cannot listen to it. Can you put on your original sound?
I was on original sound, but I had a different mic in. Now I'm back on the original mic. I
Oh,
think.
okay.
Can you hear now? Let me see.
We can hear your voice, but not the
Yeah,
flute.
so now you'll be able to hear. Right? Can you hear?
No.
That's cool. Does
Can
that
you
sound
check
come
the
through?
original sound?
I have to unplug you to hear you. Yeah?
Can you try to look on the original sound? It's on.
I have it on original sound. I did that at the very beginning. It says, oh, it got off all of a sudden. All right, now it's original. But I found at the beginning, before I got on, that even with original sound, it wasn't, it was breaking up. So I plugged in a microphone. But anyway, the who works the diaphragm the most in my experience. Then I add the ku to that, and the ku helps it pop out, and of course, pulling the tongue away is, in a certain way, the easiest. In fact, Alain Marion had said, in a way, the tongue is a nuisance. He says the real attack comes from the diaphragm. So that's why I practice the who's and kus most of the time. Let's see, are there some other questions here? Well, oh, there's an audio part of Zoom that you need to adjust when you hook up a mic. Okay. Well, this will be on YouTube soon, I guess. And will I be able to hear then what everybody has been saying too, probably? Well, I've had a wonderful time introducing the Rampal School to you all. I hope that you will get some benefit out of it. And I had asked if they would put my email address for, I don't know if they did, but
Yes, I did on the beginning of the meeting, but I will put again, since we had a lot of different questions. I will go here and put your email. So if you have any questions, you can contact directly Dr. Sheryl.
There you go. There's my email address. And you can type me message. You can send me messages. Put in the subject NFA program, and then I'll know it's not spam. Are we still on? We're still on.
Yes.
Okay. So now you've got that. Does anybody else have anything they want to say to me before we maybe end this program?
I would like to ask you to go back a little bit on the exercise that you said about the puppy, the ha 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 ha. How can you make progress and have this breath going in and out, like without thinking of it? Because seems to me that it looks like hard to maintain put the air in and out at the same time. Can you explain a little one more time?
Okay, so at the very beginning, I said it's a process. So I've been doing it for a long time now. So I started like a baby, just learning how to crawl. And those first months, I just practiced like panting. So if I'm going, let go, the let go is automatic. And then you do whoo, whoo. You never push it. It's never whoo, whoo. It's like a singer. You can't imagine a singer going, ha, by blowing out. It's ha, it's inside. So ha, ha, ha. And then coo, coo, coo. And then the tongue, poo, poo, poo. So you're never blowing into the flute. You're breathing into the flute. You're exhaling into the flute. It's just like Marion said, use the air in your mouth, just the air in your mouth to start that attack. So he was doing it with me, teaching me the tongue. But I can do it with coo. Here's coo. And who. It's that same motion, it's that same pulling back, letting go, pulling back, letting go. It's like somebody has a string tied to your belly button and they're pulling it out your back. Yank it, pull, pull. And if you squeeze your glutes even on each note, it's kind of automatic there too. I have the chair behind me. So when I'm squeezing my glutes, I almost can't blow. You know, see, if I try to squeeze my glutes and blow, almost impossible. It tightens me up. But if I squeeze my glutes, that's ku, hu, tu. So it's a process. I tell my students, particularly when before I retired, when I was teaching at the university, when freshmen would come in, I would say, or a transfer student, you'll get this. This will be the way you know how to play before spring break. It doesn't happen overnight. And one of my students transferred in as a sophomore, and by the end of her very first lesson, she had gotten it, and it was really fantastic. And the next week, I had to start over. And by the end of the lesson, she got it. And the third week, she came in, and it was gone. And in 20 minutes, she got it. And I said, I don't understand this. How come you get it at the end of every lesson, and in the next lesson, we have to start over? And she said, wait a minute. It only took me 20 minutes today. And she was right. I learned a great lesson that day. And in fact, I learned as much from my students as I taught them. They presented me with problems, and together we had to figure out how to solve them. And that's the great gift of the relationship between student and teacher. So the future will come if you're diligent. Put your metronome on 60 and play it, a note on it, tick, ku, rest, ku, rest, ku, rest, and the future will come. Okay? Let's see, are there any other questions that I haven't seen? I'm scrolling through them. Well, thank you for coming today. It was my great pleasure to see you all, and I wish I could learn how to make the microphone work so you can hear me sound good and I can hear you too. But now I've learned something.
You sounded amazingly. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. A special thank you for you, Dr. Sheryl. And this meeting is going to be on YouTube very soon. And I hope you have a great week, Sunday. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.